Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? This time we're tackling lobbying. And let me tell you, you guys sent in a ton of stuff. Articles, documentaries, even some first-hand accounts. Looks like we're going way beyond just skimming the surface this time. Honestly, the more I've been digging into all this with our expert here, who, by the way, is amazing at breaking down these kinds of complex systems. So the more I realize there's so much more to lobbying than you see in the news. It's not just about those, smoke-filled rooms. There's a whole strategy to it, a whole psychology. It's kind of fascinating, even if it is a little unnerving. But okay, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, let's back up for a second. What exactly is lobbying, and is it inherently bad? Or just, I don't know, misunderstood? I'm looking at you here, expert.
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than it seems at first glance. So basically, lobbying is when individuals or groups try to influence government decisions. And believe it or not, it's actually protected by the First Amendment, the right to petition the government and all that. Of course, most people hear lobbying and they immediately think of shady backroom deals and briefcases full of cash. And I mean, our sources definitely show AIS a multi-billion-dollar industry with thousands of professionals. And yeah, money plays a huge role, but it's not as straightforward as just, straight up bribery.
Okay, so maybe not evil, but definitely has a bit of an image problem. So how does it actually work in practice? What are the actual tactics these lobbyists use to get what they want?
Well, to really get that, we need to look at some real-world examples. And there's no better way to illustrate the underbelly of it all than looking at Jack Abramoff. He was this high-powered lobbyist who ended up, going to prison. But his story is basically a masterclass in how lobbying really works, the whole playbook.
Yeah, the sources we have on him are pretty wild. I mean, he was pulling out all the stops, extravagant gifts, strategic job offers, all to sway lawmakers. Golf trips to Scotland, premium tickets to concerts, sporting events. You name it, he probably used it. But it wasn't just about showering people with perks. He was also a master at slipping in obscure language into bills that would benefit his clients. It's almost like he was playing legislative chess,
Yeah.
manipulating the rules to get the outcome he wanted.
Exactly. That's what makes his case so interesting. It wasn't just about, directly bribing people. He was manipulating the whole system itself. And what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is why it worked so well. I mean, think about it. Even lawmakers are human, right? They like to be flattered, they enjoy perks, and they appreciate someone who seems to be, helping them get things done. Abramoff tapped into that, to get what he wanted for his clients, which, by the way, included securing licenses for Indian casinos, which made his clients tons of money but raised some serious ethical questions about how he did it.
It's like he understood how to persuade people, how to push their buttons better than anyone. It's all very house of cards, you know what I mean? But our sources also point out that it's not always about this kind of overt manipulation. There's a whole lot of soft power involved too, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the key things to remember is that lobbyists often present themselves as these experts.
Yeah.
They provide lawmakers with information, and that's how they shape legislation in more subtle ways. And that's where the lines can get really blurry. For example, there's this thing called soft money. It's basically political contributions that aren't given directly to candidates. Instead, it goes through these organizations that can then spend it to influence elections. So imagine a group that wants lower taxes for corporations. They can use soft money to fund ad campaigns or support candidates who agree with them without directly donating to their campaigns. It's a way to influence things without, leaving fingerprints.
So it's all about working behind the scenes, pulling strings that most people don't even see. And with all this money and influence flying around, how do regular people like us even stand a chance? It feels like going up against some giant faceless machine.
That's the million-dollar question, and it gets to the heart of why people are so concerned about lobbying. One of the biggest problems is just the sheer imbalance of power and access. Huge corporations and wealthy individuals can hire tons of lobbyists, which basically gives them way more say in how laws are made. And that raises a really important question: whose interests are actually being served by this system?
It's easy to get cynical, but that's exactly why it's so important to understand how this all works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get how it all works, but it's kind of disheartening to realize how much influence these special interest groups actually have. It makes you wonder if our voices even matter at all.
I get that feeling, really.
Yeah.
But remember, knowing is half the battle, right? The more we understand how it works, the better we can navigate it, maybe even change it. And actually, our sources DO offers some glimmers of hope. Oh, good. I was starting to lose faith in humanity there for a second. So tell me, what can we do? Where do we even start?
Well, for one thing, there's a growing movement pushing for more transparency in lobbying. So, online databases and tools that let people actually track what's going on, see who's influencing what. It's like uh, shining a light on those smoke-filled rooms.
Right. Makes sense. Sunlight's the best disinfectant and all that. But just having information doesn't always lead to action, right? So how do we go from just being informed to actually, like, doing something about it?
Well, that's where technology comes in. Social media, online campaigns, those are becoming really powerful tools for, getting public opinion on your side and putting pressure on the people making decisions. It's giving a voice to people who maybe don't have the money to hire those fancy lobbyists.
So, like, grassroots activism, but with a digital upgrade. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I also wonder about, like, the potential for manipulation. How do we know if these online campaigns are the real deal or just, astroturfing?
Ah, good point. Astroturfing. Yeah, that's basically creating a fake grassroots movement to make it seem like there's a lot of support for something when it's really just, a small group of people, often with their own agenda. Like those social media posts that seem like they're just regular people praising a new product, but it turns out it's a paid ad campaign. So yeah, you're right to be skeptical. You got to be careful, think critically about the information you're seeing, look for transparency, check your sources, and don't just blindly follow the crowd.
So critical thinking is key. Don't believe everything you see on the internet, especially when it comes to politics.
You got it.
But what if we want to do more than just be critical, like actually try to change things? Do any of our sources talk about that?
We do, actually. They talk about this idea of opting out, basically choosing to live outside of systems that are heavily influenced by lobbying. They even mention Bitcoin as an example.
Wait, Bitcoin, like the cryptocurrency. What does that have to do with lobbying?
It's about finding alternative systems, ones that operate outside the traditional structures where lobbyists have so much influence. Think about it. The financial system, especially here in the U.S., is super tied up with the government. Wall Street and Washington, they're constantly, back and forth. But with something like Bitcoin, which is decentralized, you're stepping outside those traditional financial structures. And to some extent, outside the influence of the lobbyists who operate within them.
So, like, creating a whole parallel society with its own rules, that's pretty radical. Is that really a realistic option for most people?
It's definitely not for everyone, for sure. It takes some technical know-how, and you got to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. But it does show that there's a growing feeling that people are, disillusioned with the way things are, and they want more control over their own lives.
Yeah, I can see how that would appeal to people, especially those who feel like the system is rigged against them. But for those of us who aren't quite ready to go off the grid and start mining Bitcoin, what are our options? What can we do to make our voices heard within the system we have now?
Well, there are a lot of ways to get involved. You can support organizations that are fighting for the things you care about. You can contact your elected officials, make your voice heard that way. Participate in local government meetings. Advocate for policies that matter to you.
So we're not completely powerless. We can make a difference. But it's hard not to feel a little cynical. It's like David versus Goliath out there. Do these individual actions really have any chance against these huge, powerful lobbying groups?
Yeah, I hear you. It does feel like kind of an uphill battle when you've got these giant corporations throwing their weight around and all that money and influence. But our sources did mention some actual efforts to make things a bit fairer. What can you tell us about those? Well, there are definitely some interesting initiatives focused on campaign finance reform. Basically, the idea is to try and limit how much money plays a role in politics. Like reducing the amount that can be donated to campaigns and being more transparent about where that money is coming from.
So the goal is to give regular people more of a voice and make it tougher for special interests to just, like, buy their way in.
Exactly. It's about leveling the playing field.
That makes sense. So there are people actively trying to change things. That's good to hear. But what about those revolving doors we talked about? Those cozy relationships between lawmakers and lobbyists. Is there any way to, like, address that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But there's a growing push for stricter rules around lobbying, like maybe limiting how soon a former government official can become a lobbyist after leaving office.
So like a cooling off period.
Yeah.
To reduce the temptation to, prioritize future employers over the people they're supposed to be representing.
Exactly. Create a bit more separation between those two worlds.
Okay, so we've got campaign finance reform and stricter lobbying regulations. What else? Any other tools in the toolbox for, the folks fighting the good fight?
Well, one of the most powerful tools is actually pretty straightforward. citizen activism.
Right.
Remember, lobbying is all about influencing those who make the decisions. And who are they accountable to? Us, the voters.
True.
When people get organized, speak up, make their voices heard, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, think about all the social movements that have led to real change throughout history. It wasn't about money or corporate influence. It was people coming together and demanding something better.
Exactly. People power can be incredibly powerful when it's channeled effectively.
That's a really good point. But I mean, it's still easy to feel like a bit overwhelmed by all of this. It's a lot, you know?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone listening right now who's feeling a little discouraged? What's the main takeaway they should remember from all this?
Don't give up hope. The world of lobbying is complicated, and it can be frustrating, sure, but it's not impossible to understand or to change. The more we understand how it works, who the players are, and how it affects us, the better equipped we'll be to, actually do something about it.
I love that. Knowledge is power. Being aware of the problem is the first step to actually fixing it.
Absolutely.
So to recap, we need to stay informed, get involved, and keep pushing for a system that works for everyone, not just those with the deepest pockets.
Well said. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are tons of people and organizations working to reform the system, to expose what's going on, and to help people hold their elected officials accountable.
Wow, we covered so much ground today. We went from feeling kind of lost and overwhelmed to actually understanding the tactics, the players, and even some potential solutions.
It's been great talking about this with you. Hopefully our listener will keep exploring this too. It's a fascinating topic and a really important one.
For sure. The more we understand about the things that shape our world, the better prepared we are to create the future we want.
Couldn't agree more.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. In a world where so much happens behind closed doors, our most powerful weapon is the ability to shine a light. So keep asking questions, keep searching for the truth, and keep fighting for a system that works for everyone. Until next time, happy diving.